Hey, it's Stevie GB here. Stevie rocks. Stevie rocks. Hey, kids, rock and roll, rock on. All right, this is episode one. I'm going to talk about my favorite band of all time, the Kinks. Now, let me tell you how that came about, because that's an odd one to be your favorite for most people. Most people, what's your favorite band? The Beatles, the Stones, the Who, Bon Jovi. Well, not those people. But the Kinks. All right. Why the Kinks? Okay, I'm going to tell you. Let's go back. Let's go back. I moved from Brooklyn to Long Island in 1972. I was barely 14 years old. That was a shock enough. I was never really into music back then. I liked the Beatles, who didn't, until Rubber Soul came out, and I thought it was weird. And then I got into sports. I played a lot of stickball and wiffle ball. I was a kid, 14. Who's listening to records? Nobody. But when I moved to Long Island, I had a friend named Jimmy, and Jimmy was a big music fan. I went over his house the first time. He had an album collection like I'd never seen before. He probably had about 40 albums, which at the time was a lot. I got up to 1,000 eventually, but this was the first time I ever seen an album collection. And, he had Led Zeppelin and he had The Who, and he didn't have any Kinks albums. I don't remember. He was more of a hard rock, very into the Doors. And I thought it was weird music, but I kind of liked it. And then one day, we went over to my Uncle Tony's house, and there was a guy there named Artie, typical Long Island wise guy. Hey, how you doing, Charlie? How you doing, Tony? It's Artie. Hey, Charlie, come on outside. Let me show you what I got in the trunk. You too, Stevie. Come on, come with me. So I went over, he opened the trunk, and he had boxes of 8 tracks. 8 tracks. Those were the thing back then. Now we had a stereo with an 8 track player. And he said, look at all this stuff I got. It fell off a truck. Fell off a truck. That's Italian for stolen. I did the quotes at the wrong time. Stolen. And they had George Harrison, All Things Must Pass. He had Alice Cooper, Killer. He had Deep Purple, Machine Head. These were like classic albums that resonated in my brain even till today. But he had one 8 track called The Kink Chronicles. Well, I brought them all home. The box, it was probably 30 or 40 or 50. I don't even remember how many, but there were a lot. And I started listening to them, and I absorbed a lot of it. I thought it was really interesting stuff. My friend Jimmy came over, and he was like, he knew who Alice Cooper was, and he knew who Deep Purple was, and sort of knew who the Kinks were. But when I plugged in that Kink Chronicles, and we used to do this thing, I used to, play the 8 track and stick a speaker out the big window in the backyard and listen to it outside because that was fun. So that's what I did. And, I had that King Chronicles plugged in there. Now, the King Chronicles was not an album, but this came out in around 1972. It was a compilation of all mostly obscure, I want to say, maybe some B-sides and songs from their first three, not their first albums, but, from 66 through 69, 70, 66 through 70. It was about 4 albums worth of material, and it was a double 8 track. It was only one 8 track, but it was a double album on one 8 track. And it started off with Victoria, which was from the Arthur album, and it had songs like "Did You See His Name" and "This Is Where I Belong." Lola was on there. "Get Back in Line," "Shangri-La." There was a lot of songs from Village Green Preservation Society, and it was very British, very quirky, very different than the Deep Purple or the Alice Cooper or certainly the Led Zeppelin I had been listening to. But what I loved about it was different. The lyrics were very interesting and sort of childlike in some ways. But what I loved about it was Ray Davies, the lead, the writer, and the singer, was you understood every word he was saying, and every song told a story. And I was really enthused at the idea that everything rhymed. It wasn't that he only told a story, but he rhymed the words. It was just perfect songwriting. Hey, I gotta shut the dogs up. But I loved it, and I listened to it all the time. I had it in my car. We used to have 8-track players in the car, and I would listen to it and drive, and I would hit a bump, and the track would change to the next track. It was a whole different time back then. So I loved it. I loved it through the whole summer of '72 and probably a little bit of '73. It's pretty much all I listened to. My friend Jimmy liked it, but he was, yeah, yeah, and other people liked it, but nobody really, it really didn't absorb with them as much as it did with me. Now, I'm getting into high school and I kind of put that 8-track aside. And, when you get into high school, you start listening to the same songs your friend listens to, your albums. And, I became more, even Southern rock and prog rock. I was Yes and the Allman Brothers and Leonard Skinner and ELP. Those are the high school bands that I listened to. And I kind of forgot about the Kinks. And it wasn't until about 1975 or 76 when I had a friend who said, I love the Kinks. You got to hear this new album by them, Soap Opera. I was like, Soap Opera? He put it on. It blew my mind. Now, it was completely different from the King Chronicles days. This was like it was a theatrical play almost about a guy who was a normal everyday guy, name of Norman. He was an accountant before I was even an accountant. And and this star guy, the star celebrity rock star comes into his life and trades places with Norman, and it was so unique and unusual, and the songs were so catchy and funny and fun. I adored it. And I started getting really into music. I was going to record stores a lot. I became like a huge I became a huge fan of all kinds of music, but the Kinks like just resonated with me. Everybody has a band that like speaks to them personally, and for me, it was the Kinks. So I started to go seeing them in concert. I saw when Sleepwalker came out, like I was waiting for their new album. From '76, uh, Schoolboys in Disgrace had just come out. And from '76 to '77, I became a Kinks fanatic. I started collecting every album. I think I had them all. I got them all. I made it a point to get them all and listen to them intently and often. I don't think I listened to anything else for a solid year. And Village Green Preservation Society, which was an album from 1968 that was just absolutely brilliant. It was conceptual, and that's the thing with the Kinks. They weren't a songs band. It wasn't like they had songs. They had albums, albums that you sat down and listened to from beginning to end, and they had a theme. There was something going on here. It was a story. The whole album was a story. It connected. It was like a play. It was, and the words were magnificent. And I understood what he was talking about. And he rhymed the word. It was everything that I thought was great about artistry and creativity and music all in one. It wasn't about long guitar solos. It wasn't about drum solos and bass solos and the most incredible voices. It was just good. It was just solid, and I could sing along, and I understood what he was talking about, and it resonated. It was just like there was a deep connection between me and this band. Well, 1977 came along, and they came out with the album Sleepwalker, which was kind of a, a distraction. It was um, I can't think of the word. It was something different from what they had been doing because the Kinks, first of all, their early days were like R&B. It was like the Stones, and they had that Chuck Berry rock and roll thing going on. But it wasn't until around 1966 that they became a very interesting songwriting band with the album Face to Face, with all little songs about life in England, the middle class, the working man. Ray Davies' writing was like Charles Dickens. It was very personal. He got into like people's homes and told the story of these people's lives. Fascinating. And I got to put it on. Phone is ringing. Oh, that's somebody. All right. I'll be back with part two of the Kinks.